Okay, so in this video, I'm just going to expand a little bit more on Humminbird Ethernet. So I gave you the more common scenarios. Now I'm going to go into a little bit crazier scenarios on how Humminbird Ethernet works and what cables to use. So say you run out of ports. There's 5 ports on this switch, right? There's another video. If you look in the preview, count how many Ethernet connections there are. The far right one in this video here is the power, okay? So there's 5 of them, right? So in this scenario, we have 3 Ethernet devices. Well, again, this isn't one, but we're pretending it's an iPilot link. So when you have 3 or more, right, you have to have the Ethernet switch. If you only have 2, you don't really have to, although I'll say I don't recommend running it that way because it's I personally believe in having the switch regardless of how many devices you have, unless it's just unless it's the standard trolley motor to Humminbird. But if you're going to hook up 2 Humminbirds, I get the Ethernet switch. Uh, but anyway, so let's just say, for example, that you have, you know, 3 Humminbirds on your console. So you have a big boat, and say you have a 360 back here, and you have, you know, 2 Humminbirds up here, or maybe 3 of them up here, you know, and then you have, okay, so count how many there are. So you have 3 up here, that's 3. Then you have a 360 back here, that's 4, right? Okay, and then if you have, what did I say, 2 earlier? 1, 2, 3. So that's a total of 7. So you're going to need 2 switches. So what cables do you use there? Okay, so what you use is you're going to have 2 switches, and then you're going to use this cable right here. Now the length that you use could just depend on where you put the switch. You could maybe put one switch up here for all the devices that are up at the front, and one switch right here, and connect the two. But it's always going to be a female to female unless it sources to the trolling motor. Um, is There's one exception to this rule, as long as you're using one extension cable on that run. So let's just say in a wild scenario, I guess it's not really wild, but a less common scenario, your buddy or you were just going, or you know, you're just a guy that buys all kinds of electronics, you were going through all your scrap parts or whatever, and you found a really short female to female connection, and it wasn't long enough to reach. Well, rather than going out and buying a cable, maybe, for example, you decided not to use your trolling motor extension. This comes with your trolling motor. So let's just say that, for example, it doesn't reach. Okay. Well, what you can do is you can use this cable, the male to female, to extend your extension cable. Now, this again is not a very common scenario. It's likely buy the right length to begin with. Ethernet has a distance limitation of 300 feet. So in a boat environment, you're probably never going to reach that. Um, and by the way, when you plug the Ethernet switches in, it doesn't really matter on this particular device. There is no uplink port on here, so every one of these devices can be an uplink port. Here's the thing that I want you to be aware of. When you connect 2 Ethernet switches with the female to female connection, you only plug in one port. You only use up one port here and one port on your other switch. It does not do you. As a matter of fact, you'll destroy your network if you plug in more than one of these ports. So let's just say you plug in this one, and both of these go to the same switch. You're going to hose your network, and if you leave it sit long enough, eventually your processor will become shot, and you'll render your device pretty much unusable. I've done this on my home network. Basically, there's a protocol called Spanning Tree Protocol in the commercial environment. They actually will block these redundant ports. Or the other option is on a managed switch, you can actually turn 2 switches into what's called a one logical port. But this is just a dumb device. All this does is recognizes a MAC address and forwards it to the appropriate device. So when you plug any one of these ports into another switch, only one port gets plugged into the same switch. So if you have two switches, that's fine. Okay, you can have one switch be your main switch or be your central switch and branch out. So this could go to switch number 2, this could go to switch number 3. That's perfectly fine. But this cannot go to switch number 2, and this cannot go to switch number 2, or this cannot go to switch number 3, and this go to switch number 3. That's a no-no. And that will create a switching loop, and what will happen is when the switch has to broadcast because it doesn't know the address of the, it's the first time it's contacted, say the trolling motor or what have you. Okay, what happens is it has to broadcast to all the ports except for the one it came in on. So what's going to happen is um, port 1, or this port here, is going to broadcast to switch 2, and this is going to broadcast to switch 2. Okay, and then both of the, and then that says, well, I don't know either, so then that broadcasts out all ports, and it's gonna create an endless loop. Okay, that's not going to stop. So remember, only one port gets plugged into the same switch. You can absolutely, I mean, you can absolutely have 5 switches if you want to. If they all go to, if every one of these ports go to different switches, that's perfectly fine. But as soon as one of these two goes to the same switch, you're going to hose your network.